Corey here. As a follow-up to the OCC video, which you should see by the time this one comes out, I wanted to give some comments based on what I saw and heard at the Blockchain Summit from the acting comptroller of the OCC, Rodney Hood. I think, and I've said it in a couple of different online forums, is that the market is not fully appreciating how revolutionary what they're trying to do, how revolutionary that is at the OCC. I think what they're trying to do is one part of what the industry has been begging for years. And when I say the industry, I mean the fintech industry broadly, not specifically crypto, meaning financial services technology companies have been really, what they've been doing all these years, call it the last 20 years, is trying to innovate in the financial services sector, of which crypto is kind of the latest version of that. But historically, things like PayPal, Stripe, etc., were attempts at innovation on what we would call the banking rails. And so what I see coming out of the OCC and the talk is very positive for many different communities. So I wanted to highlight that. For historically underbanked, underrepresented communities, what I see as a very positive development are the granting of novel bank charters. So I'll have more coming on that, but the concept of a bank charter is that at the state and the federal level, depending on the type of bank you have or the type of institution, it could be a credit union, it could be a trust, it could be a payment processor, it could be a special depository institution. There are many different types of charters that folks who provide financial services may be required to receive, the highest being a federal bank charter regulated by the Fed, which is the highest, most gatekept charter that you can get. Side note on the whole custodial banking issue, shout out to Caitlin Long, actually, who I did get to meet in person. That'll be a whole nother series of what has happened to that company, what she's been fighting through. I think she needs to be applauded for the fact that she's persevered in the face of what the government has done and attempted to do to her. And I'm really glad that there's more light on that situation. But back to the topic of the innovation around bank charters, what Rodney Hood, what I heard him say, and anyone can chime in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong, is that he looks at access to these financial services, which is really access to capital more broadly is how I would define it, as a critical right that all citizens have, and using the OCC's charter and authority to break down some of those barriers that have prevented people from having access to those financial services by making it easier for innovation through these different types of novel charters. And so when I look at that, one of the first things I think about are your credit unions, your local financial institutions, who today don't often grant a lot of loans. Those loans get packaged off or sold off oftentimes. The mega banks don't necessarily care about your everyday consumer because they're thinking about high finance. And so what I think we could start to see through the changes at the OCC, changes at the FDIC, changes potentially eventually at the Fed, is actual innovation around provision of financial services, which is basically the stated goal of fintechs, which is to provide innovative financial services. Now, of course, there's all sorts of pros and cons, but I look at it as a positive in the sense that that innovation should create competition. That competition will force your mega banks, who generally have no competition, to innovate. And exhibit A on this entire topic is the concept of stablecoins, the very existence of digital assets. Have you noticed, for everyone out there watching this, that your brokerage accounts now trade 6 days a week, almost 24/7? That would never have happened but for the innovation of the digital asset ecosystem and the fact that those exchanges run 24/7 and the traditional financial brokers see that competition and are now starting to offer new products and services to compete because they recognize an entire generation of customers wants to be able to do things 24/7. So that's a classic example that everyone will have seen, whether or not you totally appreciated that. But for the digital asset space, you likely would not have that innovation coming out of the traditional brokerage space. So that's just one example. Stablecoins as well. We've spoken about that. I'm sure there'll be plenty of talk about those rules and what it means. But I look at stablecoins as the first foray for the entire broad U.S. population and the world really, to get a better sense of what digital assets are, what digital asset rails are, and it should function similar to the iPhone, where you don't really know you're using the internet. You just know you have a nice ecosystem and a user interface that you enjoy using. So that's, I guess, the promise of stablecoins and the promise of a lot of this change. So let's end it there and let's stay tuned and see what happens. All right, until next time.